Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited about this session today on customer-led advisory boards. And just to let you know a little bit about how this came to be. So Eyal and I were talking at Customer XCon back in October, and he came up to me and he said, Jeff, we've developed this whole new paradigm for customer advisory boards. We're calling it the customer-led advisory board or customer-led board. And I'm like, oh, that's so intriguing to me because as most people from the Customer X community know, I'm a huge proponent of customer-led growth. And we talk a lot about that at Customer XCon. So I'm like, okay, tell me more, customer-led advisory boards. And it was fascinating to hear him talk about how you make the customers partners in helping run, organize, manage, set the direction for, participate in all different ways, which we're going to get into today. So I thought that was so intriguing. I said, we got to get you in front of our whole audience here and talk about this because I do think it is a paradigm shift and one that I can tell you personally, I've run several customer advisory boards in my career, and I've always tried to make them incredibly interactive and tried to get a lot of feedback about the topics that members wanted to discuss. But I've never taken it as far as what the Ignite team is doing with this new concept. So with that, let me introduce Eyal and Tatiana, and why don't you take it from here?
Thank you very much, Jeff, and Kaylee and Tatiana, my colleague, is on the call with me. My name is Eyal Danon. I'm the president and founder of Ignite Advisory Group. And I'm excited as well to be on the call with you today. I think this is really an exciting moment to talk about a new paradigm, a new vision for customer-led boards. And Jeff, kudos to you for pushing us to actually create this webinar. So let me get started. Here's the agenda for today. I'm going to go through a definition. What is a customer-led board? Then we'll talk about some of the benefits and challenges because there are some challenges with the model. And we want to be completely transparent with everyone on the call. We'll talk about how it works across the 4 CAB phases, and we'll provide some specific examples. And then we'll end up with recommendations. If you want to move to CABS 2.0, to the customer-led board model, what do you need to do, what you could be doing? So about us, I think pretty much all of you, or I would imagine many of you heard about Ignite. We've been in business for quite a long time, for 15 years. We're the only firm that is dedicated to advisory boards, completed over 300 advisory boards, engagements, and initiatives, and co-developed many of the industry best practices. And when I say co-developed, it's not just Ignite, we did it with our clients, right? We developed a lot of the best practices together. We developed the follow-up on advisory board initiatives model with Intel, along with Adobe and Oracle. We created a framework for managing multiple advisory boards. We developed the concept of the agile board with Amazon Web Services. And not only Fortune 500 companies, many of the companies we work with are smaller companies, and we are going to provide some examples on customer-led boards for smaller firms.
All right, and then let me just jump in, introduce SlapFive for those of you that aren't familiar with us. And so SlapFive, I mean, with customer-led boards, now that I've heard more about it from in the last couple of weeks talking with Eyal, I mean, that we have got a great platform for helping you scale and automate and track these customer-led boards. But SlapFive also manages all your other types of customer programs, including your reference programs, advocacy programs, your whole content creation lifecycle, referral programs, customer lifecycle marketing for expansion and driving adoption, as well as voice of the customer for capturing insights. So I'll leave it there for now. I'm going to come back towards the end and just show you a few examples of how SlapFive can help you manage and automate your customer-led boards. So Eyal, where I'd love to start, I know you're going to talk about the definition of what a customer-led board is, but I'd really love to hear you talk about the why. I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. I start with why. And so I think it would be interesting for everybody just to know, why did you even think there was a need for a new paradigm? What were you seeing and what was driving this in the first place?
Sure, it's an excellent question. So let me just see if I can move on to the next slide. Okay, here it is. So the why, I told you, right, I've been doing it with Ignite for 15 years. Before that, I was a chief marketing officer of a large tech company, and I did it for 5 years. So altogether, 20 years around one single topic, customer advisory boards and partner advisory boards. And what we've seen at Ignite throughout the years, there are some instances where companies are able to bring the customers along to the journey and solve the imbalance that we see so much in many advisory boards out there. Ignite is doing a lot of customer advisory board audits where we talk to practitioners and we audit the boards, and a lot of them have an outsized involvement of the host company, right? So the sponsoring company is pretty much doing all the heavy lifting and quite a limited engagement by the members. So the members in many boards basically just show up for an annual meeting and maybe come to some virtual meetings. On the other hand, and that's the why, companies that are able to bring the customers to the journey, to a real customer-led growth, customer-led advisory boards, experience completely different results. And that's what I would like to talk about today. So here's kind of like a concise definition of what is a customer-led board. Basically, it's a new approach to design and manage advisory boards. It's a shift from being company-centric, your company focused, to customer-centric. The priority is given to the customer agenda versus just to your agenda as a company. You want to improve your services, your solutions, your offering. You want to increase market share. You want to come up with a new business model. So instead of just being about you, it's really prioritizing what the customer's agenda is all about. And it puts their needs, challenges, and opportunities at the forefront. So when you have a customer-led board, the customers are co-leaders in everything, in the design, management, and most importantly, in the outcomes of the advisory board. If you look at this slide here, that shows the imbalance that we see in so many different boards, right? So we call it the difference between CAB 1.0 and 2.0. In CAB 1.0, as you can see, when we talk about design, recruitment, engagement, it's basically the company, the host company is doing everything, right? When it comes to insights, obviously the insights are coming from customers, but it's like, trying to look for a nugget of gold sometimes, right? Trying to dig and extract these insights from members that are not always engaged with you, right? And the action items and the follow-up, it pretty much squarely falls on the host company. When you have a customer-led board, that equation is changing completely. It's really democratizing the process. So the CAB members are involved in the design of the advisory board. What's the charter? What's the mission? What's the objectives? They are helping you recruit members, right? They are responsible for the engagement of the other members. They are equally as responsible for generating insights, and they are equally as responsible for generating outcomes for them and for the board. So it's a different paradigm shift from CAB 1.0. And the key question is, how do you infuse your customers into all aspects of the board and create so much value that your customers willingly participate and carve out time from their busy schedules, right? They're all busy, executives, influencers, or decision makers. So how do you create so much value that they are going to say, yes, I'm going to do it? And we like to think about this model when it comes to customer-led boards. You have to look at a couple of parameters at the same time. At the top is and this is a basic Venn diagram, right? But at the top, you have the business model transformation of the customer. The customers themselves need to go through a business model transformation. That's the basic requirement. Then you look at an industry trigger point. We'll talk about it. What is the inflection point? It could be regulatory, it could be related to the competition, it could be a new technology, whatever the case might be. What is the trigger point? What is the industry inflection point? And then you look at the host company solutions, offerings, technology, and you're trying to find the sweet spot. Because if you find the sweet spot and you're able to solve for helping the customers transform their business model, taking advantage of a trigger point, or actually responding to a regulatory pressure, and you can do it with your solutions, technologies, and offerings, that's when you create a customer-led board. And here are some more key questions to guide you throughout the process. The key question is, what's the unique? And the emphasis is on unique. What's the unique value proposition to convene key customers? Ignite came up with this concept of the power to convene, or the reason to convene, many years ago, but it still holds. Why the customers are going to come to the advisory boards, right? And we talked about the industry trigger or inflection point. You need to think about, what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to solve for? What are you trying to learn? And it helps to think about the entire industry first. Is it going through a business transformation? Is it going through a new innovation cycle? Is it going through a complete redesign? Is it going to digital? What are the regulatory pressures? Is there changes in customer demand, in the competitive landscape? That should be the entry point.
And
Some of the guiding,
Eyal,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Eyal, if I just want to, Bridget asked a good question that I think would be good to insert right now rather than wait till the end. She's asking, what would you say is the difference between the CLB and a user group forum? And I think she's probably asking because I've run user groups as well, and sometimes you try to make those more self-governing as user groups. You might even have officers or roles in that user group. And so, but I'd be interested in your take, the difference. How is this different?
Sure. So it's just different levels of engagement, right? User groups are traditionally larger number of customers. It could be several hundreds or thousands, usually more on the technical side. And advisory boards are a strategic forum to help you solve business issues and priorities. They operate on one of three levels. Level one is around ease of doing business with the company, improving net promoter score, customer satisfaction. Level two is around solutions and product, and level three is strategy. And the advisory board is made up from anywhere from 10 to 20 key clients. There is a term for usually 2 years, and it's a more exclusive and I would say strategic way of engaging with your customers. But good question.
And would you also say that that same difference would apply to Marissa's question here, comparing a CLB to just an online customer community? I imagine those three factors also differentiate between a customer community, right?
Exactly. It requires more to create an advisory board. The way we look at an advisory board, right? We have clients that have been with us for more than a decade with an advisory board. So it's different than an online community. Some of the guiding principles for a customer-led board: openness to exploration and uncertainty. You can see it when we look at business pain points and opportunities. At Ignite, we use a concept called the Johari, Johari window. It's a concept made by two psychologists back in the 60s, and initially it was for improving relationships. And it basically says, what are the things that you know? What are the things that you don't know versus your partner, right? What does he or she knows or doesn't know? But we actually adapted it to the business setting. And if you look at, we're not going to go into it right now, but the fourth quadrant of that window is called the unknowns. So exploring the things that you don't know as a company and your customers do not know as a company. But if you're able to solve for it, you could actually transform the industry or the market, right? When we talk about collaboration, it's built-in transparency and trust, and creating a platform for peer-to-peer benchmarking. You need to create that platform for your customers to benchmark against each other, not just against you as a host company, to have true collaboration. And then co-creators, having shared decision-making, having real-time communications. Sometimes we see our clients just use WhatsApp with advisory boards, versus using Slack or other modes of communication, but they want to make it dynamic. They want to make it real-time. They want to make it immediate. The concept of skin in the game is an interesting concept. You see, when you run a traditional advisory board, you can get obviously significant outcomes. But when you are trying to go for a customer-led board, you're asking a lot more. You're asking a lot more from your company in terms of time commitment and resources, and you're asking a lot more from your customers. You're going to see we have different roles and responsibilities for customers. So it's a little bit like a bungee jumping, right? I don't know if any one of you has done it. It's my experience, a terrifying experience that I will not repeat, but it's jumping to the unknown, because to create a customer-led board, you're asking for much more from your customers, but the stakes are higher and the rewards are higher, right? So you need to think really hard about the strategic outcomes that you're trying to achieve with your customers and get the buy-in from these customers before you implement a customer-led board. The advantages are increased access, increased relationship building, and you're actually helping the customers become influencers. This is a model we built with IBM on thought leadership and helping customers become influencers, helping them in their professional journeys. So I think we said it before, not all companies will be able to realize the promise of a customer-led board, but if you are able to do it, you will reap outsized benefits. Let's talk about some of the specifics here. A customer-led board is dealing with key topics that are not nice to have, but must have. And I'll share specific examples as we move on in the presentation. The customers need to feel that this is going to help me do my job better. This is not just for the benefit of the host company to improve their roadmap or to optimize their offerings. This is something that's going to help me personally, right? Customers are involved in co-creation of the charter, including the theme. They're taking an active part in recruitment. We're going to talk about the concept of a customer steering committee and co-chairs for the advisory board. We're going to talk about how they become co-session leaders in face-to-face meetings. How do they actually help in providing feedback on the strategic report, co-own subcommittees and working groups. And, we have boards that the customers report to company leadership and participates in sales kickoffs and other company events. So the value proposition here is that customer-led boards amplify the value. If you think about a light bulb, right? It amplifies they shine brighter, right? They increase customer insights, increase customer engagement, and they increase lift or influence on cross-sell, upsell, and revenue opportunities. I want to talk about two examples here to actually become more concrete. So Iron Mountain, it's a company that's been around for quite some time, and Ignite created the first ever customer advisory board for Iron Mountain. Those of you that are not familiar with Iron Mountain, the origin of Iron Mountain is really in physical document management. So companies used to actually load all their sensitive documents into Iron Mountain trucks, and Iron Mountain would have warehouses filled with boxes of paper filled to the rim. And they would guard and safekeep these sensitive documents. When Ignite created the advisory board for Iron Mountain, the mission was from paper to digital. How do we actually move from mountains of paper? Some of them are actually in buried deep in the ground, in underground mines, believe it or not. And how do we actually digitize? All the while trying to adjust to a new reality on data privacy, data regulation, and information governance. So we created an advisory board for Iron Mountain made up of financial services firms, right? Top banks, financial services, insurance companies, healthcare companies. And the board became customer-led in the sense that the customers of the advisory board needed to create a new framework for information governance, for moving from physical to digital. Instead of waiting for the regulators to tell them how to do it, the board itself started to create the information governance framework. And it was so intense that it became weekly meetings where customers actually calling on other employees, other colleagues from legal, from finance, from tech, from operations, their executives into these meetings, resulting in this massive framework on information governance. This is an example of a true customer-led advisory board. Another example is Ryder. Ryder started, you've seen the Ryder trucks all over the place. It started in 1933, one guy in Miami and one Model A Ford truck, right? Ryder right now has 250,000 trucks. And this is another example of a company that needed to move from just trucking to supply chain because Ryder's customers wanted Ryder to manage their entire supply chain journey, including e-commerce. And starting from the CEO and chairman of the board, Robert Sanchez, to Karen Jones, the CMO, Stephanie Wiki, the vice president of marketing, John and Danny on the success team. I mean, the entire organization became customer-centric. And Ignite is involved with Ryder for the last decade, running customer-led boards. I'm not going to spend more time here. There's a webinar that Stephanie Wiki, the VP of Marketing, participated in with Ignite. It's on the Ignite website. You can join in and listen and find out exactly how Ryder was able to create new offerings, new products, new branding using customer-led board principles. Other examples. So I want to go from great to even greater, right? Left to right. So Ignite created thought leadership for ForcePoint. This is a cybersecurity focusing on insider threats. So we took 15 CISOs from Fortune 200 companies, and they created a framework for insider threat program. So this is great. If you move to the right, AVI SPL, which is a leader in unified communication and collaboration, their advisory board created an objective guide. Note the word objective, right? It's for the entire industry, for enterprises that need to move to collaboration and communication technologies. Even though the customers are part of the AVI SPL board, they were able to create an objective guide that anyone, any company can use. That's the value of customer-led board. It transcends just the basic focus of a particular company and actually talks about the market. The last example here is a company called Acuity. Now they're part of LexisNexis Risk Solution. And they are in the crime prevention, AML, anti-money laundering. And in that industry, in financial services, there's something called model validation. So they need to show that their models are validated. And the customers need to show that they use valid models. So usually the way it works, you wait for SEC or FINRA to come in and tell you what the regulation is. Here, the members of this customer-led board created a 60-page document, 60 pages document, focusing on how the model is validated and how it can be presented as evidence to show that the solution actually works. Okay?
And Eyal, if I could just ask back on that slide, though, so 3 great examples there. I'd love to know if you can just give one, maybe for one of these, what was the example of the trigger or the inflection point that caused the kind of the recognition and the need to make these more customer-led boards. And who came to that realization? Was it you taking the idea to them, or was there somebody there that realized, no, we need to make these more customer-led?
I would love to take the credit for Ignite, Jeff, but I'm not in the habit of doing it. Like I said, you pushed us to actually present this webinar. And the truth is, in all these cases, executive sponsors from the company that saw the light and were, because I mean, you open yourself up, right? It's a place of vulnerability to become so embedded with your customers, to actually let your customers drive the growth together with your executive team. It's a vulnerable place. Not everyone can do that. So, you know, it all came from executive sponsors that decided that this is what they wanted to do. And obviously Ignite helped them implement their vision.
And was there any concern with anybody that you've helped in taking them this about loss of control of the
Yes.
advisory board? And if so, how do you overcome that concern?
Yes, and we do have a slide on that. So let me see where it is. Oh,
yeah.
no, here it is. Here it is, Jeff, right on time. So that's one of I mean, I talked about all the key benefits and all the key success stories that we're seeing with customer-led boards, but there are challenges to the model, and we want to address the challenges. First and foremost, it requires a significant time commitment, right? I talked about it before. This is above and beyond what you're doing with traditional boards. When we look at some of the key challenges with the host company, if you don't have a strong executive sponsor, if you have very limited internal resources, and if your company is not customer-centric or doesn't believe in customer-led growth, and they're just trying to chase new customers all the time instead of investing in your existing customer base to drive customer growth, you're going to run into some challenges implementing some of the things that I'm talking about. In CAB design, going back to Jeff's point, some companies are not willing to engage customers at such an early stage. Some companies are saying, we are going to design it, we're going to create it, then we'll bring the customers in, and you know, if we need to change something, we'll do it right then and there. So we see that sometimes, you know, if you don't have a clear theme, mission, and objectives, it's another problem. And if the advisory board is treated as an event versus a year-round engagement plan, that's another problem. In terms of CAB membership, sometimes it's not the right members. Sometimes there's lack of clarity, not setting clear expectations, and that fear factors, Jeff, that you mentioned. Some companies are afraid that the customers are going to take over the board, take over the meeting, or conversely, that you are going to do all the work and they're not going to rise up to the occasion. Absolutely. Go ahead.
There are a couple of good questions in the chat. David is asking how advisory board membership is evaluated at the end of a term and best practice guidance for not renewing membership and managing turnover.
Okay, I mean, these are two great questions. They are not directly related to customer-led boards. I can tell you that there's a lot of info on the Ignite website in terms of how to terminate memberships of customers. In terms of ranking members, this is, don't let the customers do that, right? This is not a case where you have 360 employee evaluation. So don't let the customers evaluate other customers. This should be done by your company. And again, we can share with you some of the work we do in terms of ranking members. Yeah. Okay. This diagram, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but basically it's the different phases of advisory boards, going from design, starting the program, recruitment, creating the agenda, communication, meeting, and engagement. And you can see where customer-led board, that's the image of the bluish people here, that's where they can add the most value to the process. Let me talk about some of the phases here. So when you do the design of the advisory board, right, we talked about the rationale for it, but our recommendation is to come up with a pre-opening team, right? It can be up to 3 customers. Our recommendation is actually 5, but if you can get 3, that's fine. And the design team is helping you craft the theme, the objectives, the mission, the engagement plan, actually the charter of the entire board. Then, as the advisory board is underway, we'll talk about customer co-chairs and a customer steering committee, and how do you actually create a successful engagement plan. So when you look at CABS 1.0, the way we work, there are different levels of stakeholders, right? At the bottom here, you have the program manager and Ignite that are responsible for managing the program, right? You have the subject matter experts. You have the steering committee, which are functional executives within your firm, right? It could be the relevant line of business owners or the relevant VPs. And then you have the executive sponsor, high-level direction for the program. When we look at CAB 2.0, we introduce brand new roles and responsibilities, and these are all customer-led, right? We talked about the role of the pre-opening team in designing the board. The CAB co-chairs, instead of nominating 1 person, we find that it's better to nominate 2, and they are, think of them as the CEO of the advisory board, but from the customer perspective, right? They're the CAB co-chairs. They're not dealing with the day-to-day, with the details. They provide strategic guidance, and they help the executive sponsor in brainstorming, in thinking about the strategic direction of the board. It's kind of like a speed dial to the executive sponsor. And then you have the member steering committee. Let's say you have 20 members on your board. You probably can have between 4 to 6 members on the steering committee, and they will determine the priorities. They will be responsible for the co-creation. They share the accountability for deliverables. And another key benefit of the steering committee is you can use them as pilot. You can use them as beta. So if you want to run something by the entire advisory board, you start with the steering committee with this inner circle. You run it by them, you hear the feedback, you hear the perspective, you change it, you adapt it, you customize it, and then you present it to the entire advisory board. You can involve members in recruitment. You'll have the slides. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but you can ask members to actually recruit other members for you. You can ask members to help you work on the discussion guide. Ignite believes in creating a discussion guide and then interviewing the members. So you can have members of the steering committee actually jump on the calls with you. It's actually a very informative way of doing it. Co-creating the meeting agenda, starting with the overall theme, gathering key topics, helping Ignite creating the interview discussion guide, participating in the individual interviews, then provide feedback on the summaries, review the executive report, and then provide final approval to be presented to the company. So this is basically a process that is customer-led. Ignite and the customers are actually creating the agenda before the executive sponsor approves the final agenda. And not only that, you can actually have customers help you run the actual meeting. So they can become co-session leaders with internal subject matter experts driving the agenda forward. So here I want to talk about an engagement model when it comes to customer-led. And by the way, this is an engagement model that has something in each and every month, right? So starting from Q4, let's say October Q4, you have the annual in-person meeting. The next activity, engagement activity, is the follow-up. You present the meeting report and you have a quarterly meeting. Then you have a working group meeting in December, a customer steering committee meeting in January, and then you can see more working group meeting, more quarterly meetings, more steering committee meetings. You basically have an activity marked for each and every month, and you build this steady drumbeat of activity and engagement with your members and with your internal stakeholders at the company. So what are some suggested next steps? And we're going to take questions at the end. So suggested next steps, don't try to do everything at once, right? It's not easy to implement a full customer-led board. And I'm sure Jeff can tell you, implementing a full customer-led journey strategy also takes time, right? So some of the recommendations, right? You can revise your charter accordingly. You can nominate co-chairs. You can create a steering committee. Involve members in recruitment, in the agenda creation, in making sure the meeting is successful, in working group, in coming up with a continuous engagement model. And remember the concept of skin in the game. You are asking the customers to do a lot more. You need to do a lot more. So you need to make sure that the outcomes are going to be worth it, right? You need to take it, basically, you need to take it very seriously. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to talk about some of the ways that SlapFive can support you from a tech perspective.
Yeah, and then thank you, Eyal. And this is fantastic. It's definitely eye-opening. And you mentioned a couple times how there's a significant time commitment for the host company, right? And so it's important, though, that significant time commitment is spent doing the most value-add work and not the mundane. And so that's why I think there's such a super opportunity to technology enable a customer-led board. And so you're customer-led, but you're technology-enabled. And there's just a couple areas that we at SlapFive help companies run boards like this. You mentioned a lot the importance of recruiting and managing your CAB members. So not only you can be capturing their needs and challenges and adding to the rich profile of the CAB member that you're creating. So you have a profile and then you can share those profiles with other members. You can allow members to nominate other customers who they think would be great members of the CAB or other people they know. And then you even track the roles. You talked about the co-chairs, the steering committee, perhaps as working groups. Well, you're going to want to track who's in what group and what activities are they doing as part of that rich profile and ability to keep tracking who's doing what. And then if you just go to the next slide, there's also a lot of rich insights that are coming out of the CAB engagement, not only the feedback, so you could use SlapFive to capture that feedback about what should be on the agenda for the next meeting, but also taking the engagement with the members that you're having, both in the meetings and between meetings and in the steering committees or subcommittees, and turn that into reusable, valuable content, customer content with the right permissions. And this is especially valuable for thought leadership. You mentioned what's in it for the members to be sharing their voice. Well, you want them to feel like they're building their reputation and demonstrating their thought leadership. So turn those insights into thought leadership. And then just the third area, and there's lots of areas, I'm just highlighting the top three, but the third one is just, in the next slide, is just engaging between meetings and throughout the year. And so you can be gathering constant feedback from members on topics, on events, on activities, on things they want to do. You can be connecting this to strategic initiatives. Your strategic initiatives could be aligned with your company's trigger or inflection point, or what you're trying to, a strategic initiative of your company that this is supporting. And then and then capture insights from people remotely, not just while they're in your meeting. And then best of all, I didn't put this on the slide, but the session made me think of it, is because you mentioned, tracking upsell, cross-sell. Well, wouldn't it be great if you could now go back and show the additional revenue that have been generated within your CAB companies to say, hey, this CAB more than paid for itself, this CLB. And so using the Salesforce app, you can now track the different influence events that your members are participating in and tie that back to renewal opportunities and upsell opportunities. So if anybody is interested, Jeff, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, Jeff, this is a very important point. I can tell you that many of our clients, obviously we hear stories on the ROI and the lift and cross-sell and upsell. Obviously, we are not allowed to share any of it, but the point that I'm making here, that it takes a lot of time and effort to actually come up with that data. So yeah.
Yeah. So again, if anybody wants to see a little bit more about how that works, just go to slapfive.com/demo or just ping me at Jeff@SlapFive. But I know you also have some great resources. So I think why don't you talk about some of the resources you have, and then we'll definitely open it up for Q&A. And so there's a couple already in the queue that we'll get to, but anybody that does have a question for either myself or Eyal or Tatiana, go ahead and do it. What's up? So tell us about these resources, Eyal.
Yeah, sure thing, Jeff. So on our website, right, on the Ignite AG website, you have resources that maybe it's actually too much, right? But anyway, you can have all the CAP assessments, ebooks, infographics, webinars, everything is there. So we encourage you to actually go there and look at it. And we also offer a free consultation and evaluation where you can talk to one of our advisors. They're going to listen to your advisory board, to your issues and needs. I mean, we hear it all the time. Limited engagement with the members, limited accountability. We don't really get any initiatives out of it, and so on and so forth. And we can provide some recommendations for your program. So feel free to take us on this offer. Great. And I think, let's take some questions. I mean, I saw one question that related to engagement, poor engagement, just saw it in the chat. So, engagement is a tricky topic, right? Because it has so many different components. At Ignite, we talk about a set of key principles that you need to have before you can hope for long-term engagement. Like I said, we have clients that have been with us for more than a decade. And you can imagine how difficult it is to keep the engagement for more than 10 years, right? So we talk about the 80-20 rule, which basically means that the members, the customers of the advisory board need to talk 80% of the time during any interaction with your company, right? It could be online, it could be in person, it could be a breakout, doesn't matter. They need to do 80% of the talking, and you need to facilitate in such a way that allows for that 80% to come out. And you need to do it in a way that allows them to benchmark against each other. Like I said, this is a key attribute. The peer exchange aspect is critical. If you only make it about your company, it's not going to stick, it's not going to work. So you need to actually find what are the key topics that can elevate your board to in a board that customers actually want to join and want to contribute. And we talk a lot about the concept of relevancy and the concept of an intentional advisory board, right? The advisory board needs to be intentional, not just a nice to have because someone in marketing says that, our competitors have an advisory board, we need to have one as well. Jeff, any thoughts on engagement from you?
And actually, it was a question that I had that I was thinking about that for you that I also have a take on. But what I'm wondering, again, this is addressing Sarah's question about pivoting a current cab towards this model and maybe reinvigorating the current cab. I'm thinking that it's probably quite possible that it might be a different type of persona or personality type that wants to be engaged in a customer-led board versus a traditional board, because traditional boards, they tend to be a little more passive. You just come and share and do a brain dump and then leave, and then maybe a couple times a year. Do you find that when people are pivoting to this model, does it usually entail a recomposition of the types of people that are on the board, or is it like a natural flow that people that are already inclined to be on a traditional board are also kind of wired for this type of taking more of a leadership and proactive role in helping direct it?
I would say it's more of a natural flow, but you still need to drive it, right? Because if you're not having the right structure, and you don't have the customer co-chair position, and you don't have it clearly spelled out, or how the customer steering committee is going to be built. It's interesting. People ask us, what if everyone wants to be a co-chair? What if everyone wants to be on the steering committee? Guess what? It doesn't happen. I mean, you have the true leaders that are willing to dedicate the time within the advisory board, and that's how it goes, right? I mean, obviously it's a somewhat sensitive process to handle, but we find that if you provide the right opportunity and the right infrastructure to do it, it flows naturally versus the need to change everyone. However, sometimes we find that when companies pivot to customer-led, some of the members, for whatever reason, are more comfortable with older models of the company doing all of the work, and they just show up for meetings, and this is a judgment call in terms of, do you want to actually revise the composition of the board or not?
And Alyssa had asked a question a while ago about paid cab positions versus unpaid. This is a little foreign to me because I've never run a cab that had paid cab positions. So maybe you've seen those before, but how do you account for the time meetings outside of the actual scheduled boarding meeting and event? Is there? Do you have any experience with paid cab positions, or I guess some type of incentivized cab position?
No. I mean,
Okay.
I tell you, Jeff. I mean, our philosophy is that if you do the cab the right way, it provides such an incredible value that customers actually need to pay to be on the board. Obviously, you're not going to charge them, right? But think about it. If a company is able to identify a strategic issue, a trigger point, an inflection point, and actually convene together a group of customers to solve that industry pain point, or leverage or capitalize on an opportunity in the marketplace, this is invaluable. And for them to actually listen to their peers over a long term. So we never dealt with paid positions. We don't believe in that model.
And I'm with you there too. I would think if you're resorting to a paid position, there must be something wrong with the value proposition that you have built, co-created with your members for the board, right? And so it reminds me of back in 2018, I coined the terms paid customer advocacy versus earned customer advocacy. And the distinction was people that have always resorted on paid customer advocacy, basically offering rewards and earning points and things like that, gamification, so that you can get swag in order to get people to perform acts of advocacy, right? That's not really delivering true benefits to the career growth and reputation building and thought leadership goals and the personal intrinsic benefits that customers want to get out of it. I would think it's very similar here, where I would consider it like an earned cab, right? You have to earn their loyalty and their dedication to participating by making sure it is delivering the value and helping them with those intrinsic benefits that they all want to achieve. And if you haven't figured out what those are, find out. Ask your customers. I mean, I advise everybody, never start a customer advocacy program without having deep insights from research of what your customers like to do, what types of activities do they like to engage in, and then why. What is their motivation for wanting to do this? Because it may not be the same for every single persona out there. All right, excellent. Okay, then there was the one. Any other thoughts? Oh, Alyssa's confirming that. Good. This is a pivot I've been wanting to make. I assume going from paid to earned is probably the pivot she's looking to make. Good. That's nice to see. As a follow-on to what the question Kaylee asked earlier that came from David asking about kind of evaluating at the end of the term. I know it's not directly specific to customer-led boards, but is there, maybe just to touch on this as it relates to customer-led boards, you mentioned it's usually like a 2-year term. What's your position in experience in terms of how many people continue, and how desirable is it for people to continue if they have been a highly valuable contributor and want to continue to participate? Do you encourage that, or do you encourage fresh blood every 2 terms, have term limits? And then do you stagger the terms so it's not a completely new group being started each of every 2 years.
Right. You know, this goes back to the question of we can look at it as the term for the entire membership of the board, right? So you have some firms like Amazon Web Services, they basically change the entire term of the board every year. So every year it's a brand new board. And then you have other firms that have, you know, we call them anchor tenants, right? Like a shopping mall. I mean, you have the same customers for years on end. Our position is that fresh blood, fresh perspective is always good. If someone is adamant that they want to stay on in a leadership role as a co-chair or in the steering committee, we always try to accommodate it, because you can't buy that passion, that engagement, that dedication. But we like to see some new people coming in. You know, it's like anything else. Anyone that comes in that is new is going to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. So this is our recommendation.
Great. All right, I'm going to pick on Sarah's question here that just came in. And while I read it and digest it, I'm going to ask Sarah to post why your in-person events, and like how you assess your in-person events being much more successful than your virtual events. If you could put a comment there. But let's tackle the topic of, you know, in-person versus virtual, because I would assume that if you're designing this properly, you should be able to get just as much value from in-person and virtual, although the in-person is going to have the opportunity for a golf outing or a dinner or something like that, where you're that's harder to do virtually. But you know, are there recommendations you make on sort of the mix between virtual and in-person, because we're trying to drive engagement throughout the year, and not all that engagement can be in person. So, or are there particular types of goals that you like to achieve in the in-person meetings, where others that you might steer more towards the virtual?
So it's a mix, right? You can do all in person. We don't believe that you should do everything virtual if you can avoid it. And this is not just our position. I mean, this is coming from members of advisory boards. When you think about it, you know, we met thousands of members of advisory boards, and their feedback, which is more important than my feedback, right? It's unanimous across the board. They find incredible value in the in-person meetings, especially if the in-person meetings are more than half a day or a day. We have in-person meetings that last several days. So when you do it over several days, you know, you go into workshops, you go into deep dive on topics, and you do it over days. It's a different way to attack a problem or an issue versus a virtual call.
Oh, that's very interesting. So it's almost turning into a mini customer conference with these people then, and so you're planning that agenda. But I imagine that's much easier to pull off in the customer-led model, because you have the steering committee and you have the working groups that can help you put all of that content together, as opposed to having it all fall on the company's stakeholders.
Exactly. And we hear that all the time, Jeff, when, you know, companies sometimes call us last minute and what are we going to talk about in the next meeting? We have no content, you know, and the meeting is next month, right? So by having the ongoing dialogue and collaboration with the customer steering committee throughout the year, you're actually able to come up with an elegant solution to this challenge. And I want to be sensitive to the time. We're always sensitive to the time at Ignite. I think we have like 2 more minutes here.
Yep.
So Jeff, I'll leave it up to you in terms of how do you want to wrap it up?
Well, let me just see. So Marissa was asking if anyone's willing to share how many different boards are each of you running in your orgs, and does everyone have a group like Ignite or an agency that they use to supplement the planning and execution of their CABs? Maybe a question for you, Eyal, like how many different boards, or what criteria should people be using to decide whether to try to consolidate all of their needs in one board, or when does it make sense to break out into different boards?
If I could answer it in 30 seconds, Jeff, I think I should get an award. But
okay,
You know, we always strive for consolidation. I mean, that's what we did with Adobe, for example, right? Going from 20 to 11, and Adobe is a customer-led growth company as well, right? So our preference is consolidation as long as it makes sense. Sometimes, especially when it comes to different regions, EMEA and APAC, our preference is to actually have it in the region versus having one global board. It's just extremely difficult to manage.
Okay, so regional breakouts could make sense, obviously, and does it make sense? Like, is there some benefit in kind of having a consolidated, like, single board, but perhaps breakout working group, like a regional working group, like regional meeting or something like that, but they're still part of the greater group and still benefiting from some of the synergies of and some of the like in between meeting collaboration and knowledge sharing benefits and insight sharing benefits that they could have. Would that make sense?
Absolutely, and some of our clients are actually working according to this model.
Great. All right. Well, why don't we take that? I know it's at the top of the hour now. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank Eyal and Tatiana also for coming up with this new paradigm and sharing it with us today. I hope everybody takes it seriously and you see, you know, how to reach Ignite. I imagine that introducing this new paradigm, just like introducing customer-led growth into a company, if you're encountering any of those obstacles, I know Ignite are the perfect people to help you kind of break through that and sell it to your stakeholders, because that seems to be a never-ending challenge and responsibility that we have. So, and then to everybody that's asking for replays, yes, they will be made available, and then let us know your feedback if you'd like us to continue and do even a deeper dive on this, or if you'd like to have us do a session on this at Customer XCon. We'd be glad to do that as well. Let us know what you think, as everybody that attended. And lastly, thank you, Eyal and Tatiana, for putting the work together to bring this event to us today and for sharing this great concept with our Customer X community.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jeff and Kaylee.